Hi, everybody. Today's the first day of Taurus. So, we're going to dive in and talk about Taurus and its relationship to the natural cycle, and then look at how we can use that in our own natural cycles, right? And especially in the process of self development. So, we're going to look real quick at where Taurus pops up in the cycles of the seasons and in the cycles of astrology. And so, we have Taurus here. Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac year, right? Taurus is right here. It follows Aries. And Aries, you get that spark of life. You get that first burst of spring where the shoots are reaching out of the ground, out of the mud and the snow. The plants are starting to grow their greenery again, right? If they're deciduous trees, and reach for the sun, starting to bud. And you have that first spark of life. Taurus is really when this first spark of life comes into a greater level of fullness. You'll see a lot more opening blossoms and a lot more blooms, right? There's this vessel opening itself up in the life of the plants around us. And it's making room, making space for pollination, which is more that energy of Gemini. So that energy of Taurus is this energy of containing. It's this vessel energy. So it's intimately related to our own bodies in the fact that not only is Taurus an earth sign, so Taurus is very related to the physical and the physical realm, but it's related to our bodies as this concept of vessel. Now, Taurus rules over naturally the second house, and the second house is often talked about as the house of possessions, right? But it's more than just our physical possessions. It is all that we own, and so that acts as also aspects of self, right? So, or aspects that we see as part of the self, right? So, for instance, Aries in the first house. Those are going to be things that are so much a part of us, it's almost hard to see them, right? In my first house, I have Jupiter and Gemini. So I use that as an example a lot, where I love gathering information from all over the world and from all sorts of different traditions, and then putting them together in new, cool connections, right? And which is why this works so well for me doing this workshop, where that differs from the second house possession is not only is it going to be like physical possessions like your car, my computer, things like that, but it's going to be the things that we own, like parts of our identity that we own. So for me, seeing myself as a spiritual person, right? Seeing myself as kind of a spiritual groupie, like goes through and experiences all sorts of different traditions. The part of that is the one, right? That is there in the one is in the first house would be that Jupiter spiritual orientation, where spirituality and self-development is incredibly important to me. But the way that I start to own that as a part of my identity is going to be more of that second house possessions, right? Venus is the one who rules over Taurus, and Venus is the goddess of pulling things together. So it's all these things that we draw to ourselves, all these things that we draw to ourselves and include as part of our identity, whether we identify as liberal or conservative, or we identify as global citizens, or maybe the citizens of our nation, whether we identify as masculine or feminine, right? Like these different ways that we draw identity into ourselves or to ourselves and possess them. It's also a house, and I was talking to a friend about this a little while ago, it's the house where we first start to draw boundaries. You can't draw boundaries in the first house, right? The first house is just who you are, right? There's no boundary. There's no outside world yet, right? The outside world first starts to dawn in the second house, where we get to say like, oh, these things are like me, which immediately creates the counter polarization of those things are not like me, right? That starts here in the second house. So when we're talking about drawing boundaries, that can only start in the second house, right? The energy of the first house, that Mars, Aries, first house energy, allows us the energy and the confidence to declare our boundaries and to actually hold to that. And it provides the energy and the passion that we need to declare what our needs are. but those needs being met and those boundaries being set can only start to happen actually in the second house. So it's this interesting space where we start to really create our own spatial relationship with the world around us, both in a physical way, in the fact that we're spatially relating to other things through our bodies, in this physical manifestation, but also in a metaphysical way, where we're starting to create relationships of things closer to who I am and further from what I am and who I am. And where I really like to work with this energy of Taurus when it comes to personal development is really working on that actual physical body, right? And from there, we can go into the metaphysical, right? We need to have a healthy body. We need to be able to manage our own stress and be able to manage our own health and our nutrition. We need to be able to connect with our body in order for us to have the strength to do the other metaphysical pieces of, or maybe not metaphysical, but psychological pieces of drawing our boundaries, asking for our needs to be met. And we need to be able to do all these things if we ever really want to establish a healthy environment and actually be able to create a life where we have those other possession aspects of the second house and we're doing it in a healthy way, right? You could gather all those ways. You can gather a ton of possessions, and this is very related to like hoarding. You can gather a ton of possessions, but if you aren't taking care of your body, if you're not well indwelled in your body and nurturing and supporting it, and the psychological piece of the fact that our emotions and our consciousness arise from this body. So when we're taking care of and tending our body, we're also taking care of and tending our emotional life and our mental life. If we're not doing that, then it leads into other things where maybe you have the possessions and you have a house filled of clutter, or maybe it's well organized, but you are possession oriented and it's all about acquiring that next big thing, that next fancier car or next bigger house. And other aspects of life are lacking because we're not connected with our bodies. And where you really see this is relationships to our bodies and stress, which affects everything in our life, and relationships to our bodies through trauma. Especially in the modern society, we are very disconnected from our bodies, right? We our instant reaction to medically, our instant reaction to injuries, illness, mental health challenges is to medicate and numb the sensations of the body, right? Just repress the body into a new state of being, right? Numb the pain, numb the messages, numb the emotional content. And we do that through our entertainment as well, where we really zone out. Like everyone talks, oh, I just want to zone out. Yeah, we're zoning out from our bodies and our bodily experiences. And we also do that in our, especially Western civilization and culture is very obsessed with, okay, you have your weekend drinks. Maybe you have your weeknight drinks. We use alcohol, marijuana, other substances to numb ourselves out of our bodies. So we end up becoming very disconnected from our bodies. And what this does is it throws us into the other realms. It throws us in the realm of air energy, which is mental energy, where we're overthinking everything or overanalyzing everything, or we're escaped into these fantasy worlds, and drives us into our watery energy, where we are lost to our emotions because we're not actually feeling the emotions in the body. We, as a part of the body and as something we can work through in that much more physical way with the body, we are just instead awash in our anxieties and awash in our depression and awash in our feelings of desire and longing and want, rather than seeing emotions as a message from the body to the consciousness and to our psyche. We instead just get lost in the emotion itself. And so Taurus is a fantastic time to really get back in touch with the reality of our body, right? In this energy of Taurus and Venus who attracts, and Venus who pulls things together, pulling our consciousness and our body back together. So if you're working with me in the workshops on the integration work, that's really what we're going to be working on is stress management, getting back in touch with our senses, getting back in touch with the sensation of being in our bodies. It can sound weird and esoteric at times, like, what do you mean being in our bodies? But when you are working on this, oftentimes people will experience that they aren't consciously aware of being in their bodies most of the time, right? And so we're working on getting ourselves back inside our bodies, feeling out the emotions from within, feeling out these states of consciousness from within. And we're also going to be working on enjoying our bodies, right? Because Taurus loves enjoyment and Venus loves enjoyment. But where this is enjoyment is it's enjoyment from actually being within ourselves, from actually indwelling within our bodies, rather than enjoyment of, or rather than a consumption of the world by trying to be out of our bodies and trying to be out there and consume a hunger that is in our bodies, oftentimes just because our bodies aren't actually being indwelled. Like the hunger is coming from them because there isn't anything actually taking up space and room in there. We're not actually in there experiencing our emotions through our bodies and experiencing our lives through our bodies and caring and nurturing and taking care of them in that way. And you see this, like I said, a lot in trauma work. A lot of people disassociate. I have so many clients who talk about like kind of seeing life from up over their shoulder. You see this in addictions. You see this in people running from one stress state into another. And when we are indwelling fully our actual bodies, there's a lot less hunger because we're actually taking in everything, right? We can go for a walk and we can breathe in the scent of the flowers. We can breathe in the beauty of the nature around us and the sunlight and be fulfilled because we're actually experiencing things from this embodied state, the state where we indwell in our bodies and when we really actually take up space in these vessels we have, right? Rather than just like, oh, what am I going to do tonight? It's a Friday night. What am I going to do tonight, right? The point of recording this is a Friday night. What am I going to do 2 weeks from now? Where am I going on vacation, right? When am I going to get that house with bigger rooms that I need? Or when am I going to get that job promotion? And we're not actually here in our bodies. We're everywhere else trying to fulfill some need that we feel in our bodies, right? So I've been going over the tarot cards that align with the signs. And honestly, for this, for Taurus, this was a lot harder. I'm going to have to go a little bit more like esoteric, right? Aries was easy. It's like, here's the emperor, go out, you conquer life by having experiences, right? Here's a king and a queen and a knight. And that, it just flowed a lot more. Sometimes when people are trying to connect these traditions, connecting like astrology and tarot, they don't align as easily as we would like, right? And other people they see the world in a different way. So they see connections that those just don't feel like they resonate. I do feel like these resonate, but I had to dive a little bit deeper. So we're going to start off here with the Hierophant. May not be pronouncing that correctly. Always double check my pronunciations. I had a speech impediment until grade 6. You could barely understand me until like the 4th grade. So I sometimes get that wrong. But okay, we have this Hierophant. And the Hierophant is related also to the Priestess, right? So your first 6 cards is going to be the Fool, who is kind of like doesn't know anything and at the same time knows everything. He's just got faith in the universe. Then you have the Magician, who really knows how to manipulate matter and manipulate the universe and work with the energies of the universe. Then you have the Priestess, right? The Priestess comes next. Who has this indwelling of the spirit, right? Connects the spirit to the material world. Then you have the Empress, who often is related to the earth. She's that physical manifestation of things, and life and generative property and power. And then you have the emperor, who is slightly a little bit more disconnected from that spiritual aspect and more in the physical realm, and has kind of conquered that physical realm, right? Then now you have the Hierophant. And traditionally, the Hierophant is talking about like systems of organization, right? Systems in which, while the priestess is like the spirit moving into the personal life and the spirit moving into your life, the Hierophant is the way that the spirit can move through the systems of the world, right? Oftentimes it'll be represented as the Pope. And you see like the crosses of spirit and matter. You see that they are raised up in between the columns of spirit and matter. They have authority and power through the crown. They have earthly authority. They are connecting the keys of spirit and matter. They are initiating others into this tradition. And I was like sitting with this, I'm like, okay, Taurus definitely is earth energy. So there's definitely that aspect of the physical realm. Okay, cool. Systems of organization, okay. That's a little bit stretching it for Taurus. It's more maybe of a Virgo thing. But where I see this really is the fact that we can look at this in an internal way, right? What's interesting about this is the Hierophant is the exoteric, right? The external face of spirituality in the priests and in the Pope. Whereas like the priestess is more of and the hermit later on is more of the esoteric, like the internal experience of that spirituality. And where I see this is if we take this image, we take this Hierophant image and we apply it inside, we apply it within, then Taurus really is the space where we create that container, which is what the church is supposed to be, right? It's what spiritual organizations are supposed to be, whether it be the church or the Sangha for Buddhism, or it be the communities of Hinduism and the temple of Hinduism. Temples of Hinduism, or it be the mosque. These are supposed to be containers for the spirituality. They're supposed to be containers for us living our spiritual lives in community with each other. And you can have that with Taurus, right? Taurus acts as the container of spirit. It acts as that physical container of spirit. And so I think that's what really connects these energies, is that the Hierophant is that physical container for that spirituality that allows it to be embodied and interrelate with the rest of the world in physical matter and interrelate with the community and these systems. And Taurus is that first embodiment of that vessel aspect that allows us to truly embody that spark of spirit from Aries into our lives and into our bodies, so that we can interact with all the systems of the world and other people and communities and our families and ourselves also. And so that I felt drew the real connection there. And then when we go into the court cards, it starts off, and this will be familiar from from Aries, because they always go from they always move. There's always two court cards, right? And so they rule over the transitions between the signs. So that transition from Aries into Taurus had this King of Pentacles, and now that we're in Taurus, this is where we're rising from, and we're going into the next card. And so we talked about last time how there's obviously all these sources of life. There's these vines growing. What's interesting that I'm noting this time is that there's mushrooms here. So it talks about the full cycle, right? There's life in this growth, but mushrooms arise from decay, right? They help things decay. They break things down. So it's a full circle of life, and it's a full aspect that the material realm, this realm of earth, has the fruiting and the ripening of the grapes, which are printed on his robes. It has the life, and it also has death. He's got his head on the head of, or he's got his foot on the head of what looks like maybe the Taurus bull, though it doesn't have horns. And you have mushrooms like growing from the earth, which would have grown from something that's decaying. So earth has that fullness, right? It's got the life, it's got the death, it's got the good, it's got the bad, it's got I don't like making dualities like that, good and bad, but it's got all those spaces of gray and those things that you want in your life and those things you don't want in your life, right? Those things that we claim to be a part of ourselves, be a part of our identity, and those things we really never want to see or come in contact with. Earth's got it all. And you have this king here who has mastered his relationship to that earth, right? He's mastered his relationship to embodying the practical aspects of earth. He has obviously acquired his wealth. He's got his castle in the background. He's on his throne. He's surrounded by life and abundance. He's holding the pentacle in one hand, showing that he is a master of that energy. He has his scepter in the sphere, which often represents authority and power of the world. He's got his crown. He's here. He's mastered it. This is what Taurus energy is freaking great for, right? Is like really rooting in and being like, okay, I will do what I need to have the creature comforts I need to have, right? To meet my needs, to make a stable environment for myself, to be grounded, to really create a space for me in this world, to make my own castle. I often tell a story about Tauruses. It's popular in this, especially Western culture, in modern Western culture. Dudes don't decorate most of the time, right? At least, whatever. Stereotypical straight dudes don't decorate most of the time. You don't see much art in their places. And I tell this story and everybody laughs because they know this, right? So many men don't really decorate their place until they enter into a relationship, right? And the one exception I know from this, me, like I bring my books and I bring my clothes if I'm single, right? That is what I do. If there's stuff there, I will, like, I have some Taurus energy, so I like to make a place look good. But if I'm moving, like, my main priorities are my clothes and my books, and my cookware, right? The Taurus I know, that the only man I know who is different with us, he's a Taurus, and everything in his space, everything in his house is like color coded, and just he's got artwork up on the walls, and it's like themed rooms, and it's like mellow lighting and color palettes, and it's so comfortable to be in his space. You walk into his space, you're like, oh yeah, like this is nice. And he just has so much Taurus energy. And that's what Taurus loves, is it wants to be able to just create that comfortable environment that's just easy on the flesh and easy on this physical matter, and is connected with the body because it feels itself through the body, and he feels that too, right? He's very connected with his body, and he processes information through his body and through bodily experiences. And so this is really where Taurus's strength is the fact that it's got this energy already, right? It tends to know how to hold things down and create, when I say hold things down, I mean in like a stable way, like just bring everything together and create this nice, stable space in the material. And so the next card kind of shows what can be useful to Taurus, I feel like, in furthering its development, because Taurus is so great at bringing things, or at creating that stable space, but it's a fixed sign, so it can be difficult for it to actually gain a range of movement or take a lot of action. And so we come now to the Knight of Swords, who bridges the gap between Taurus and Gemini. And so swords are related to the property of air, which is related a lot more to the intellect and to the mental. And you've got the knight, he's charging forward. Knights are very active energy. And Taurus, the thing with Taurus energy is, if it's nurtured, it's a consistent energy. It's a fixed energy. So it will just keep on going and going and going. But it needs to be nurtured, and it needs to be cultivated. It needs to be comfortable, right, while it's doing that. and it's not going to jump off into new things, right? That's Aries energy. That is Cancer energy. That is Libra and Capricorn energy. Taurus is going to like to be in a more familiar realm. And so that's where the challenge becomes actually this Knight of Swords and being able to create that space in life where we are grounded, where we are comfortable, where we are nurtured and nourished, and we nurture and nourish our body, and we are connected with our body, and yet not become so attached to that that we can't enter into a new idea. We can't enter into a new perspective of seeing the world where the Knight of Swords would be able to dash in and be like, actually, I am going to enter into that other kingdom, right? I am going to have this new thought and see where it goes. I am going to see the world through a new way. Those things can be very uncomfortable, right? And so Taurus energy can tend to avoid those. And this is something that we need to be able to cultivate so that we have the adaptability that comes from the air signs, and where this leads is into Gemini, and Gemini is adaptable, right? So that we can merge that fixed state of Taurus with an adaptability of being able to see new things. And also the initiating energy of Aries from back when, where we create new projects and we see them to completion through that energy of Taurus. So it's always a merging and a mixing of these energies. And we need that in order to create the full alchemy of developing our lives. So that was some information and a quick run through for Taurus. We will be, if you're in the tier, this is alchemy, we'll be working on this integration. You'll also hear nods to this and the rest of the moon cycles, the new moon, full moon, because Taurus is going to play a part in all of that. And we'll be chatting about this more too. And if you have any questions, please ask them. Ask them in the comments here in the group, on Patreon, wherever you are. And thank you. Enjoy your day. Enjoy this Taurus season. Bye.